Do we recover from grief is a question that comes up when I'm delivering life's questions to teenagers, and it often sparks quite a lot of conversation of teenagers saying yes or no and responses around that. And what we also talk about within grief is is not just about loss or death of a family or friend, but it's about loss of other types of loss of relationships, friendships, moving house, loss of jobs, lifestyles. So recognising that grief is part of a loss process and the experiences around that. And the grieving, that emotional response to that, is very real. There is a model by Lois Tonkin, who's a researcher and counsellor in New Zealand. She was working with clients dealing with loss, and she was finding a lot of models weren't actually working or fitting with what her clients were experiencing. And so she happened across a lady in a conference, and she talked about her loss that she experienced. And the model that came from that was growing around grief. What happened with this lady who lost her child was, what she found in her loss was that the loss that she was experiencing, the grief that she was experiencing, this was her life, and the grief was very much every part of her life. It was all consuming, very powerful, very strong. And what this lady imagined was, over time, was that her life would continue, but the grief would get smaller, and that she would experience it on a smaller scale, but her life would stay the same as it was, but just the experience gets smaller. What she actually found was that grief stayed the same. It was very strong, very powerful, and very all-consuming. But what she found over a period of time was that life grew around it. She experienced other things, but what she could find was, in any given time, she could go back into that experience and that grief feeling, all-consuming, very powerful emotions and feelings at any given time. And I explain this to students when we're in schools, of an experience of my daughter, who at 11 years old, we lost our dog, Biscuit. And her grief was very much every bit of her life. She was crying all the time, reminiscing, photographs out, and it was all very consuming. Songs were very upsetting for her. Seeing the dog bed, dog run, any mention of a dog was very upsetting. And I guess she imagined that her grief would get smaller, and I guess we did to a certain extent, and she would be fine. But actually what she found was, she could go back into this grief at any given time. Life did grow and has grown around losing our dog, Biscuit. We have 2 new dogs within our house, and we have a lovely time with those dogs. But if my daughter sees a golden Labrador and it reminds her, she will go back into that grief, very powerful and very strong, as it was the day and the weeks after losing our dog, Biscuit. And this story really hits home with students. It makes them realise that actually we don't get over. We learn to live with, yes, life grows around, but we can still go back into that, and we need to be able to support people whenever, whatever, however they're experiencing their grief.